Hello, everybody. I'm Colborn Bell, back with another episode of NFT Sundays with the artist Martin Lukas Ostachowski. Sir, pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Colborn. Always a pleasure.
These series of interviews that we do with the Museum of Crypto Art and DMINTI are really looking at kind of answering the question for people, where is the art in the NFT space? And beginning to facilitate, this dialogue between the contemporary art world and the emerging crypto art scene. Thankfully, I think there is nobody more knowledgeable as to where the art is than you yourself. So I would love for you to just, begin, say a little bit about yourself, explain how you found NFTs, crypto art, and what it was all kind of like in the beginning for you.
Sure. So I started out as a traditional artist. I painted. I did a lot with paper. Had always like this fascination for really, really long and tedious processes, which I kind of continue now in digital art.
I was gonna say.
But and it kind of also goes then with the timeline, right? Like these long, enduring projects, meticulously. I don't know. I'm kind of drawn to it. But in around 2017, I got interested in crypto in general as like a currency. I was reading a lot about them, and I started, to see as I read more and more about it, the technology behind it, right? That it's okay. It's not just money. It's really like a technology or an application platform which allows a lot of things. So I was curious to see what are like use cases for the art world, and that's how I stumbled upon, the first registries and like Monograph and things like that. And that's how I also discovered some of the crypto art platforms right after they were founded, and was fortunate to join them. What it did to me though is I shifted my practice tremendously versus or towards the digital. I was always hesitant. I was always using digital tools to create my work, because if you spend so much time working on your pieces, weeks, months, sometimes years, if you don't have a good idea how the composition or the end result will look, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy. So
let's talk about your pieces are consistently thematic, right? When you see a piece, it's Martin's piece. And yeah, it's
thanks.
just beautiful. So, how did you begin to do this work? What inspired you? I know this story, but I think everybody else should as well.
Yeah. So when I started out, I started kind of with visualizations, right? As I started to understand concept in the space, I tried to visualize them, because I always thought that, it's going to be important for inclusion in future. So I started developing a body of work which uses art to explain the technology. It does it sometimes with humor, sometimes, it's just mostly a visual, which kind of attracts people, but then you can basically dissect complex processes. And as I continued working in this field, what really struck me is like to see the symbolism between clouds and the blockchain, right? For me, the clouds really was something which I was always interested in. Like I was living in 3 countries. I was moving like over 30 times. So the one constant in my life was always the sky. You were never really deeply rooted to a physical place, but like, the travel, the sky, that was always something which I took with me and was always part of me, right? So I felt always more connected to the sky than actually to a place. And then when I started, playing with or exploring the blockchain, I thought like, okay, that's such a beautiful symbolism which you have in the cloud. It's a constant transformation, as the blocks are added to the chain. It is basically constantly evolving. It is fast paced. It is intangible. And I thought it's like a great symbol for like the fragility of the space, because at the end of the day, it is a manifestation, right? It is we see the value in it, or we derive value because it's like a lot of people agree on it. And the moment people would stop believing in crypto as a technology and crypto as a currency, and they would disconnect their nodes, basically this whole ecosystem would collapse and everything could dissolve like a cloud again. So I use that as a symbolism and play with it, as a medium, as like a symbol. I use cloud photography, videography, and try to always incorporate the cloud.
Look, like, I love the beautiful symbology of the cloud, right? Like, I am also a window seat person. I have that window up. Like, everybody hates me. Let the light flood in. Like, I'm looking out the window to take that, 10,000 foot view of the landscape below, to kind of like remember this as, like the smallness of all of us down here trying to like effect that change, but then also like entering the ethereal state of being in the clouds. And you are right about this community. Like, it is nebulous. It is always shifting. Values are changing. Like, different things are happening where it has to be fluid. And that idea of the state of water in its vapor constantly transforming, I think, is just like a beautiful, beautiful symbol. But it's an elegant one as well, right? And it speaks to the aspirations and the motivations. And maybe like, because you were so early to this space, maybe you can kind of speak to what were your early aspirations and visions, and who were also some of the luminaries that you found alongside of you that you identified with kind of their value set?
Sure. So I think I just wanted to mention that I totally get that with for me, the biggest moment in the flight is when you cross basically this cloud, when you exit it. Like, it doesn't matter what happened before. Once you break through it, this is where it happens, right? And I think the concept I like is like, it is borderless. It's like, it is international. It is like, and it's so symbolic for this crypto community, right? Like, because it doesn't matter where people come from, what their background is. Once you're in this space, it's like you're breaking through these clouds, and we are like, everybody's a stranger and a friend, and
right
at the same time, So I've really kind of embraced that. But when I first started, I thought I saw mostly three aspects of it. I think it was, for me, the first time I saw really the potential for digital art. As somebody who wanted to, grow his art career, I kind of neglected digital art really before I discovered crypto art, because I found that, there was hardly any opportunity aside from like few, commissions or like, very, very scarce opportunities to exhibit. And it was also kind of like living a paradox, right? You have like a digitally native product, or like not product, but like an artwork, and then you're forcing it into a physical medium, because that was the only way back then to work with it, right? And I think that's also where I really enjoy what you're doing with the Mocha, is because you're not trying to force it into our current perception of how art should be displayed or how we interact with it, because this is, you want to keep it in this digital state, which I find is so fitting, but yet still very provocative or
and
new and uncomfortable,
even like,
for
unlike traditional static museums of the past that existed in the physical, like, we have continued to evolve, shape, and grow and explore different elements of what this, again, like a very ethereal space. It's emergent and constantly changing. But I agree with you that digital artwork needs natively digital display. And for me, that has never been about like a television screen. It's never been about like experience something on your phone. You need the depth and the immersion, generally, I find, that virtual reality provides. And you need like the size, scope, and scale, and like reawakening of imaginative wonder. Like, the phrase is head in the clouds. like quite literally. Like we need to get out and break people out of conventional ways of thinking. And for me, that's always what this was about. I'm super curious because you were in this space much before me, and you guys laid a ton of philosophical groundwork that I really learned from. So who for you was like helping guide this thought leadership, especially in the ways that, you know, blockchain could come forward and empower artists, and, you know, kind of power digital arts as a new market?
Yeah, I think it was really the entirety of the community, because it was back then so small. You know, you imagine like all the super artists and the collectors were all in a Telegram group, and it was actually possible to have a conversation because, you know, it was just a handful of people, and, you know, the feed of new artworks was like 1 or 2 pieces a week.
Right.
You know, like this was the pace, the space was starting. So you could have really like meaningful conversation in there. And I think out of this early community with these first artists, you know, we kind of, or like most of us, we just kept talking, right? We exchanged artworks because there weren't really collectors. So you know, the first pieces I collected were all exchanges with other artists. And this is something which I still try to do today, because I think this is still, you know, it's such a part of this whole crypto spirit, you know, like it's like, hey, I dig your work, you dig mine. Like, let's forget about this, you know, like bidding and whatever. Let's just exchange, you know, let's see and start a friendship or a discussion or conversation, even if it's just a visual one, right? And out of these discussions, then collaborations evolved and other things. But I think if you want to have some names, it was really all over. I mean, one of the person who really put things together and was the initiator then, or what became one of the, you know, crypto art position papers, was Massimo Francese, or Hex 6C. He initiated kind of like this first crypto art, a decentralized view paper. He started writing that with another data scientist in Amsterdam, and it was funny because he showed me the paper and asked like for a little feedback, and I came back with like such a catalog of suggestions that he says, hey, maybe you just want to be co-author. And I said, okay, sure. And then, you know, this whole concept evolved from like seeing it just like from our perspective. It was like really including the perspective of everybody at that nascent state, you know. So he included crypto, like really traditional art historians. And, you know, Blake Finucane brought up a point which I found very interesting, that she compared basically crypto art a lot with concept art, you know, where you embrace the concept over the file, you know, which was kind of like also like advocating towards like the token would be part of the artwork. You had like, you know, gallerists like Super and Known Origin, two of the became co-authors and tried to basically create their point of view as like, you know, a kind of like a different approach, because, you know, it's quite different from an artist point of view, right, where you were headed. And I think even Sebastian from the Decentraland, right, he's also like one large collector with the Momus collection. He also participated and brought kind of the point of view of a collector into the space. And I think that was I think for me the first time we really tried to grasp what is this all about and moving forward, you know, because we had to kind of conceptualize it, contextualize it, and really put it into words and ideas. And so I think that was for me. I was
just going to ask real quick, you know, where I believe it's on Hex 6C's Medium page, right? But where can people begin? Is it also self-hosted? Because this is a fundamental text, right? This is
it was published first in the Arxiv, which is like this free academic directory, which is, I think, is hosted by Cornell University. So they're basically all academic papers which are freely accessible. It's there. And then last year in August, the Leonardo Journal, which is kind of like a peer-reviewed art and text journal, they also published it in an abbreviated form. Yeah, but it's fun because when I reread my contribution in that paper and I kind of tried to outline, what I see as an artist for it, seeing it like as like this vehicle which could drive digital art into the traditional art world, which I still find to some extent is true, or I hope at least. Then, I saw it like really as like this unique marketplace for digital art, which I find very difficult. There's a lot of artists have to work a long time to the point where they really can have some sort of opportunity to sell their art and get some sort of like, incentive to continue. And I found with crypto art, you had like such an opportunity to cut this year-long process short. Like if I look at, it took me like 2-3 years before I really was able to sell physical artworks. And that is a period which, a lot of people who are like right out of university or in whatever situation they are, that's a lot of time to invest in without having anything to show for if you want to, if you want to grow it towards like your career or whatever, it's like a long stretch. And now you have crypto art here with the marketplace, which brings you directly to the collector. You don't have this artwork funnel of like a gallery system, which kind of, rewards you based on your CV, which you're trying desperately to develop. There you have basically now these marketplaces which rip apart this tube of this funnel and say like, hey, we connect you now with potential collectors, other artists, other people. They're gonna see your work, and secondly, you also might be able to sell it. And I think that was unique for me, seeing it to be able to, make a living at such an early stage in your career if you want to.
I think something that is incredibly interesting and people miss was like the depth of an academic subculture within this, right? People were like, I even remember Super Rare saying very early on that like they were just obsessed with the transparency of the data, right? And and Art Gnome as well, right? Publishing and talking about data and bringing transparency. And there is, such an interesting double-edged transparency to these markets that plays, of course, with like the anonymity of wallets, and people complain about wash trading. But maybe we can speak to that, like just taking it back to like its essence and its core. I think you talked briefly about like one of the things that attracted you to crypto art. We've talked about the disintermediation. We've talked about like direct market access. What else, do you find and like how do you feel about this issue of transparency?
I think maybe another point before we go into transparency was the huge community aspect. It was like, it was at least in the very beginning, and this is something which I think with this growth period we're alluding a little bit, but it was like really the sense of, a local community of artists which are in similar positions, which are interested, which are exploring a new medium, and are openly sharing, openly celebrating each other's successes and failures, trying to help each other and collaborate. And that was something which I found it was like a very, very big component to it for me. Like I found kind of friends, right? With whom I still talk, with whom I still collaborate, with whom I still exchange artworks, even like almost 4 years later, and everybody's busy, but we still kind of go back and chat. And that is this community aspect, I think, extremely underrated. It's extremely important. I think as we are growing, we have to find a way to bring that somehow back, because
talk about that more, because I also came into that culture, and I came into a culture where an artist would make a big sale for $1,000, and then they would come back and they would spend $200 on another person's art, $200, $100, and they would give like a lot of that back and just show that love, appreciation, and support. So I also have lately felt perhaps that is lost, and a lot of people are yearning for that. Can you just like speak to the power and importance of that? I know you have been.
Yeah, I think, yeah, no, definitely. I think we, we had some sort of support system, like which we had like this community where people could address questions, which was very welcoming to new people. And it was basically a give and take mentality of everybody in the space. And I find now, as we are growing fast, and I'm not talking even about like corporation and celebrities, but there's a lot of new people coming in which are really actively seeking
Yes.
to extract and don't contribute. And I think that for the people who want to contribute, we have to create these environments again where they can feel welcome, where they can feel home, where they can find help, support, and also a community which is interested in their art, in them, and is like mutually helping each other, right? Putting together things together, shows together, organize events, like crypto voxel shows or
Right.
whatsoever. This is how it started, right? It was just artists saying like, hey, we want to exhibit something, let's put something together. And I think that mentality is something which I see right now a lot in these PFP projects, which I think that, driven for me at least with this environment of the pandemic, this is really one of the success factors, is that people find this community there because they have instantly something in common. So I'm thinking recently a lot about like, how can we create this sense of community back for crypto artists, and have create this kind of environment where, you have this sense of belonging in a time where it might be difficult for a lot of people, and where it's fun for you to be part of too.
Gosh, there's so much to. I don't know how macro we want to get, but there's a lot to unpack there. Of course, like so much of the growth of this industry was fueled by everybody being at home and everybody feeling uncertain, and all of these restrictions and implementations that governments kind of placed on the world, and being fearful at a time. And like we came together again. It was like loving, it was supportive, it was fun, enjoyable. We were going into new spaces with new friends, and back to your comment earlier, like it was truly borderless, right? We think about the friends that we've made, and it's like Mexico, Italy, Argentina, like all over the world, brilliant minds coming together in this idea of like global communal villages. And all to say that I don't know if that has been lost, but there was certainly like a gambling and addictive element that came together, and did I don't know exactly what the question is, because I think again it's incredibly nebulous, but something that always came to me that I'm not sure I necessarily agree with was the hierarchy of like NFT art, crypto art, that you put together. Do you want to maybe kind of like explain that classification and how you see all of these projects kind of fitting in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think education is one part of it. That's why I try to spend quite some time in, I'm reworking right now the definition model, and try to kind of draw the history more from in less in a timeline, but also like in a text form based, where I want to kind of focus a little bit on the values which kind of formed this space, right? Because I think if I just start with your question, because I feel like going off tangent again. So the way I always saw it is like, for me, NFTs is really not more than a vessel for digital assets, right? Because the NFT definition has expanded so vastly in the last few years. We have now wearables, we have metaverse properties, we have rights, we have licenses. So NFT itself is not equal to art, and NFT art is kind of like a subsegment for me for crypto art. because there's a lot of artworks which are, for instance, fungible, and I think that is a distinction which is a lot of people still don't understand, the difference between fungible and non-fungible. Having something which has like the equal face value of something else, like any coin, or and then you have like an artwork which cannot be exchanged for the same value. And I think people not being familiar with that, everything becomes an NFT, which is basically related to crypto. And that's, I think, the distinction where I think crypto art is maybe the better term, because not only would we capture these fungible tokens, like these coins, artistic coins, or social tokens, but we also have the idea of like what about art which is not tokenized? What about like smart contracts? What about like other elements of digital art which are just conceptually fused to the blockchain? I think crypto art has just this broad scope of capturing all that, which I find is for me advantageous. And you're also more likely to be right saying crypto art than NFTs, because if you look at Rare Pepe, for instance, a lot of the cards are not NFTs.
Right. They're tokens.
Because there was no distinction between the cards each other. Yeah, they're basically they're fungible tokens, and so everything is NFTs. People talk about physical NFTs, and like it's like, no, you don't know what an NFT is.
I mean, that's like inherent in the Museum of Crypto Art's manifesto, right? Like the first two lines, like let's expand and look at like what is art and who decides. And like the blockchain as a medium, again, for all sorts of conceptual art, right? To begin to tell like programmers that they're not like it's not cold hard logic that you're dealing with, but actually a very creative and artistic process to begin to design these systems. Which, and then again, like a lot of the NFT gets reduced to just like marketplace innovation. But I think it was more like a tremendous value creation and realization for the power of blockchain systems. So, I don't even think we've touched on the fact that I can't imagine there is anybody more knowledgeable to like the history of this evolution, and anybody more like suited to like speak to how certain things came to be. We should certainly make mention of like the incredible timeline that you have created and host on your own website. I generally point people there as a first step when they begin to like look into, again, like where is the art here? Where is the formalism? Where is the practice? Where is the academia? And so much of it comes from you. So maybe let people, of course, like know where that is, and perhaps like what compelled you to begin to compile this.
Sure. So it's at my website. It's mlo.art and then /history. It has right now I think around like 325 milestones in the history, dating back from 2013-14 when we saw the first occurrence up to today. I updated today. But yeah, it tries to capture like relevant artworks, which at least were relevant in that sense that they gained either like media attention, were exhibited, were written about. It captures the occurrence of platforms, the occurrence of big moments, be it technologically or like advancing the space. And I think it started really for me from a more personal level, because when I first started working with like generative art, I worked a lot with like blockchain data, which is something I still like to do today, and creating like this real data to create basically my artworks, because I like the idea, as much as I also enjoy playing with like random functions and things like that, I love the beauty that the data behind the visualization has a meaning. So I was working for months on a piece which was exhibited in 2018 at the Canadian Centre for Architecture, where they were hosting like a blockchain event, and they were like looking for artists which are exploring the blockchain. So I was like super excited. I have worked so long on the piece. It got great feedback. I was disappointed because I was the only artist. I kind of hoped to meet some others, but that's okay. So I was still so excited about all this, and then I discovered Rhea Myers, had like similar concepts, but they're like 4 years ago. So I was like floored, I was floored. I wrote her like, hey, I did this and this, and she said, oh, that's great, this is really cool, and then we chatted a bit. But like, I thought like, how can I again invest so much time, because it did, like, a lot of my pieces take so much time. How can I invest so much time if I don't even know what happened before? So I started kind of scanning, like what has happened, what were pieces which were before. And I started writing a blog post about it, but I shortly noticed this is just too big, it's just too big to capture. So I started really putting this bullet point list or a list together, because, the whole narrative and keeps changing too, right? I mean, when I started, the entire discussion was like, oh, is it CryptoKitties or CryptoPunks? But like, no, it was like, okay, we have already like concepts like my soul, where Rhea Meyer kind of tokenized her soul, or wrote like this smart contract which you could trigger with the transaction if it's art or not. So a lot of conceptual pieces, or like, Kevin Bosch in 2013 created like a
the
conceptual
Bitcoin bank,
out of wallet hashes and things like that. Exactly. So all these things, so the narrative kept changing, and I thought with the timeline, I allow myself to add elements without having to rewrite it over and over and over again. So what I'm doing right now is I still try to write it together or put it together, but like more in a general view, to explain like, okay, that this is a movement, and for me it is a movement that derived in the cypherpunk group, right, where we had like the strong advocates for privacy, for self-governance, for having the right to choose if you're anonymous or not. And then, we shift towards like, this is so abstract, people don't understand it, so we need something to kind of make it tangible. So we need materiality. And that shifted the whole discussion towards like physical Bitcoins, which is so absurd if you think about it, right? But in 2016, there were like almost 60 manufacturers of physical Bitcoins, because that was just the biggest interest back then, like we need a discussion piece, we need to show people what it is. And then, in a moment of like when the Silk Road controversy happened, right? And I think that was something which is very, very important, is because that was a moment where everything Bitcoin and blockchain got rejected out front, because, oh, this is just like illegal, this is just like for, drug addicts or like perverts or whatsoever. So everything Bitcoin and blockchain was bad. So out of this same kind of time range, you have now the discovery of Dorian Nakamoto, right? Which I found was such an important pivotal moment, because we were kind of like looking at a group which was very, very small and cohesive, but was still lacking some sort of identity. And Dorian Nakamoto, even though very quickly, identified as not the founder of blockchain, has still become the prophet. Like he's still depicted in artwork until today, because we embraced even a wrong prophet more than none. We needed some sort of identity for it. And I think these are like the elements which I try to right now put together like more in a text form. So it's kind of, you don't have to, because it's sometimes hard if you have like this timeline with these over 300 milestones to see maybe the connections or the patterns in between, and to contextualize it with what happened with the blockchain history. So I try to, make it a little bit more comprehensive to see, or at least write about the connections and maybe things which influence each other from my point of view.
I just think it goes back to speaking as like crypto art as the larger medium than, NFT art. Right,
Yeah,
because,
definitely.
a big interest to me, of course, in the beginning was the idea of crypto art again as that visual language that would help spread the adoption of cryptocurrency, right? And if
Yes.
we kind of and here I am, of course, in like a church, right? Who has better than like spreading, a message through imagery than the church. And in that, like you need prophets. Like humans are the same. We need the same stories, and we need them in digestible ways. And I, at the end of the day, believe that cryptocurrency is more stable, better money for the world. And like you need the image and symbology, and it almost also speaks to a lot of the early arts, people criticize for being, childish or screensaver-ish, or but I think it's almost like post form and it's conceptual, right? Like we needed those
Yeah.
images of Vitalik. We needed those Ethereum symbols to begin to like speak to the people that were involved in the community, that were able to, as you say, kind of like make that abstraction of not needing the physical Bitcoin, but of Bitcoin as an idea and representative of larger values.
Absolutely.
So it all, how do you feel as somebody, who was kind of like early vanguard, early historian of this space, the rush to market perhaps of all digital artists, do you think it will pass as a fad and it will return to crypto art? Or do you think the promise of like marketplace innovation will continue to pull artists, and those artists will pull in additional collectors?
A lot to unpack here.
I know. I'm sorry.
maybe one quick point. The interesting thing is that NFT art was very, very promoted by these original crypto artists, which wanted to differentiate them from themselves. For like new artists coming into the space, not interested in the technology or in the spirit of crypto at all, which I found was quite interesting to see, because basically they saw like, okay, and this is maybe where I'm just gonna loop back and say like introduce like blockchain related art, what this was for me, because everything blockchain related was either playing with the blockchain conceptually, using it as a theme, in very early
So maybe like
representation form, and very
Nilly coins, color
sophisticated later
coins,
on.
the My Soul project. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, you can even use it even if you used it as a method of payment, it was for me blockchain related art, because, we're looking right now where everybody knows what it is. But if for instance, there was an auction in England where, I forgot his name now, but he basically sold his entire collection for Bitcoin, and it was so unheard of that it made like international news, and it really promoted the technology, So from a standpoint today, it is not something special, but using crypto as like a payment method for your art was, in 2016, 2015 was quite groundbreaking. So a lot of these elements had like, if they were not part, if they did not encompass the history of blockchain and whatsoever, for the original crypto artist, this new wave of digital artists was kind of lacking this knowledge, right? Not lacking this passion, lacking the idea of we want to promote the technology, we want to promote a solution here, an alternative, and they're just using it as a medium. So that's where a lot of them tried to promote actively, okay, you're doing NFT art, you're not doing crypto art. It was almost like reducing it. And which I find quite fascinating, Yet as everything is evolving, I think we have to return to the crypto art, because we are just so much more and so much wider project which we need to capture. But moving forward, I think I always found that, throughout the last 4 years, that the amount or influx of artists and the value of crypto is some sort of correlating.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think. Look, I think when you invite like creatives like this into such a blank slate but powerful technology, right? You are just inherently increasing the future potential of that technology, right? Because people will bring all sorts of new ideas, and I mean, it is certainly no coincidence that I think prices have like risen and have been more stable, and we have really almost won in facilitating that like outer ring of adoption beyond like technologists, and even so far as to put it like into the mainstream. Like people may not own Ethereum or Bitcoin, but like they own NFTs now. And there are ways to like take a credit card and buy an NFT, and that is probably for a lot of people going to be their first introduction to blockchain technology. Because
absolutely, art became the communicator of this technology, right? I mean, it was so abstract, nobody wanted to know about it, but now we have like something which is so contemporary, like it's meme culture, right? And now we have like basically memes and art, which is so easy to understand, and guess what? It's already like a functional use case since so many years, right? So people can get around the idea because this is something they're very familiar with. This is not about educating about like inflation and limited supply and proof of work. This is about like, this is the digital medium, like something you're used to from your games or whatever, but this is actually really yours now, so you pay with this digital money for the digital asset. So it really facilitated this whole discussion and showcased a use case which was actually working, and it was a positive use case because it introduced ideas which were life-changing for artists, such as royalties and things like that.
I mean, you see somebody like Xcopy, who at this point must have made more in secondary sales than primary sales. It's just like absolutely incredible. We see people go in and out, but generally the people who have been around from the beginning have stayed. And it is a powerful community. And kind of in like the last bit, I just want to, speak to your work in Montreal, the conference that you hosted, I think 200 plus artists, a free conference that, you put on, I think with the help of Oficina SDK. And in the middle of like a raging bull market in NFTs, right? You just opened up, a space. You should speak to it. Tell everybody tell everybody what you did. I was only there, and was incredibly grateful to be there.
Thanks. No, we were really happy to have you because so it started really like Jean, who was the co-organizer. She was reaching out to me because she wanted to do something with NFTs, and she was working on an idea to propose to the city. So we were working on a proposal which did not come through as a funded project, but I was always pushing we need a conference, right? So really the idea was that all these conferences are happening around North America or the world, but really nothing, despite such a huge creative pool in Montreal, was happening in Montreal. And the idea was, okay, why don't we put together a conference which addresses exclusively artists? Let's take this group of people who are one of the most interested in it, but let's remove them from all the collectors, let's remove them from all the people who are speculators, and let's just make an educational event guiding them through this maze of complex technical terms and scams and new currency ideas and conceptual art, and try to put something together in 2 days which really can serve as like a starting point to get started, or at least get an idea of it, so you can form your own opinion if you like it or not, or if you want to get started or not. But you know, you have at least heard the pros and cons to form like an opinion. And we were extremely grateful, you know, that great speakers like yourself were able to join us. And in this little gallery in Montreal, I think we had like really some of the biggest names in crypto. You know, we had you, we had Jason, we had Shivani there, we had like so many great artists in Montreal already, which were dabbling in the space but didn't know each other. And it really created like a little community event. We were a little bit unfortunate because we had quite a bit of more curfews and whatsoever, that we had to keep the discussion more on Twitter than with future events. But I think now it's the time where we can start to really move this idea and going towards like a regular meetup for artists, just to drop in, you know, chat, exchange ideas, ask their questions, and give them a place where they can get like unbiased, or like at least info and feedback, which is not with an agenda.
And I think it's like a wonderful place to conclude, because it just speaks to it speaks to you, right? It speaks to the values you hold. It speaks to the core of this community. It's an invitation for people to not rush, right? To begin to like meet people, understand, figure out the why. And I think once you derive the why, you begin to see the value. And once you get there, like imagination and sky's really the limit. So just like sincere gratitude for all that you do, for like the history you keep and the space that you hold. Thank you again for joining me. You know, Martin Lukas Ostachowski, artist, Colborn Bell, Museum of Crypto Art, and thank you to DMINTI for producing.
Breaking news.